Hello, I'm Paul Irish, and welcome to 11 More Things I Learned from the jQuery Source. I suppose this is a sequel to the 10 Things I Learned about the jQuery Source, which, if you haven't seen, go check it out. But for now, let's just get right into it. Ooh, ASCII Yoda. ASCII Yoda, who, I don't know, must have been the Force or something, but he's green just by the power of syntax highlighting, and that's pretty cool. ASCII Yoda has a message for you, and it's use the source, Luke. And this is what this is about, which is, I think, especially in the case of jQuery, there's this point as a developer where you're starting to debug things, and then you have to go into jQuery because something says it's not defined, but then you're looking around and like, whoa, this is crazy. It's right around then when you should actually dig in a little bit more. It might look a little intimidating at first, but to be honest, the more that you dig in, you kind of like work your way into it. A lot of parts are really scary, and that's okay, but you should really start digging in, and you learn a lot more about how it actually works, how each of the methods that you typically use, what they accept, and how it shifts things around, and you learn how to do things better. So let's talk about some of the things that I picked up when I was looking at the source. First, there's this crazy way that jQuery kind of starts off. So we're up here, we're in jQuery 1.4.4, and up at the top, we have a few jQueries hanging out. We have this jQuery, this guy, that one, this one, this one, this one. Yeah, I don't know. But there's this funky thing about this one right here, right? Because it's a jQuery, and there's a function, but there's this paren right here, right? And the paren is kind of like we use it as a convention to be like, hey, this probably is not going to be a function that's going into jQuery. It's probably something's going on here. And so if I go down to bottom where this is, which is, well, it's about 900 lines down, which is somewhere, oh, there it is. So just trust me, this is the end of that right here. And right before it is this return statement. So I'm going to like take this over here, okay. So here's that jQuery with the function, here's the end of it, here's that return statement, a bunch of stuff happens at the top, and then there's this jQuery inside here, right? Okay. So this return statement, it takes jQuery. It takes this one. This is like the hyperlocal jQuery, right? Which is a function which returns basically the return value of jQuery fn init. And then that goes to that. And so this jQuery gets assigned to our globals. And so this is how we always access it, right? From these two guys, from dollar and from the global jQuery. So now we're taking our local one, we're bringing it out to the global ones, and then the return value, the result of this expression right here, when all these assignments are done, we're left with essentially this value of jQuery right here. And that is what gets returned to this function right there. And that function got immediately invoked. Ben Allman likes to call this an immediately invoked function expression, or for short, an IFI, which is kind of nice. So this IFI basically takes that jQuery and assigns it to that jQuery, right? And that one isn't really even the global one, because this is like jQuery's jQuery. It's within this, this big closure here, which basically keeps all of jQuery contained. And so this is the jQuery that jQuery.js is using. But it doesn't the one that goes outside is this one. And they're all the same value, but it's just interesting how there's all this kind of like scope thing. So it's kind of like a module pattern. Sort of, not really. It's weird, but I want to show one thing that it's kind of similar to this, and this funky functional the IFI return value thing, which this reminded me of. And so this is from Has.js. Pete Higgins is leading this. A number of other people are involved in it, and I'm going to show you this little bit right here. What we want is a base tag, and base tags are weird, but we want a base tag for some reason, right? And you can only really have one base tag. So what we do is we're like, hey, get the base tag if there's a base tag. We want that one. But if there's no base tag already on the page, we're going to need to make one, right? And so we basically, we get that. If that fails, then we're going to move on with our logical OR. And we have an iffy right here. And inside that iffy, we create a base element and then inject it into the DOM. And the result of this expression right here will be the element again. And so, but it got injected in the meantime. And so that is what is returned by this function. And then that then goes into the base variable. So we kind of have this like fun thing where we can actually do some functional stuff while all that we're doing is trying to get an element assigned to a variable. A little tricky, but it's kind of fun. All right, let's go on. This is new in jQuery 1.4.3 and 4.4, where there's the HTML5 data attributes. And so like you have data OMG and data awesome and data hot obj, right? And the jQuery team noticed that, you know, there are these data attributes, which are pretty cool. And then jQuery had a data method, which is for setting and getting data associated with an element. And we're like, well, that's kind of similar stuff. And so why don't we just like bring those together? So that's what we have now, right? So we can grab the div, do data OMG and get that string yay, sweet. Data awesome, and it's going to see that string true and it's going to convert it to a Boolean because that's probably what you wanted to be dealing with. So that's now true. And if it sees a JSON object, like this guy, it's going to turn it into an object. And so hot obj is going to return an object like this. You know, if I don't know, type of this would be an object. But I can look into it, right? And I can grab the best property out of that object, and yes, indeed, it is jQuery. So that's pretty cool. I want to show you a little bit of how this works. So we're going to go into the data adder function. Data adder. All right, data adder. If nothing was found internally, right, try and fetch any data from the data attribute. We might want to make sure that's an element. So then we're going to grab it, right? We're going to grab that data attribute off. And if it is, if we get it and it's a string, then we might have something to do, right? Otherwise, there's nothing. Undefined, don't care. All right, so if it's a string, we do this thing. And you might look at this and you'll be like, whoa, ternary operators, like crazy. Like we got this, so like, you know, this ternary operator expression, if this is false, then we basically do this whole thing. And then and you're like, this is pretty weird. And I was like, I wonder what happened if I tried to, you know, if statements are a little bit more friendly than ternaries, you know, I think you could say. So what happens if we rewrote this with if statements? This is what happens. It doesn't look very hot, to be honest. Yeah. And part of it, and most of it is really because what we're trying to do is we're trying to do an assignment. And so we have to set this data equals on every single thing. And it's just, that's not very efficient at all. But ternaries are really, really good at taking an assignment and then basically, you know, doing some logic to figure out what actually goes into that variable. And so data is the thing that we care about. And it's going to be set to a new value, probably, depending on what happens. And so if we kind of look at this part by part, we got if it's true, false, or null, we're going to set it to be those primitives. Okay. Then next, if none of those are if all those are falsy, then we just keep continuing down this ternary, you know, like, I don't know, it's like Inception. Yeah, totally. Okay, so we're here. If it's not a number, so if data is a number, then parse float it into a number. Otherwise, we have a regular expression defined up there, and it basically says if there is a curly brace or a square bracket, then we think it's going to be JSON, and so we're going to actually use parse JSON to get an object out of it. And then if all that fails, then it's data, and so data equals data. And what that it's basically, it's a string, so it's set to like hello. And so the cool thing, it's like the end of Inception, where it's like it's a string, and then it like bubbles up to this ternary, and it's like, oh yeah, well it's that, and then I go up to that ternary, and it's like bubbles all the way up and like hits the assignment. It's like, string Inception. Okay, I'm gonna move on. Yeah. Okay, I pulled this out of the jQuery source. It was, you know, you kind of look at this and you're like, you kind of freak out a little bit, because you got this logical or, you got this and that not, and then the in, and then you're like, in, I don't know. You're like, I was comfortable up until you did the in, and then you're like, okay, so what's happening first here? Like, I don't even know. And so this makes me think of in grade school, the please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. This is the order of operations for basic mathematics. It stands for parentheses, exponentiation, multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction. And that is how we did math. And it turns out the JavaScript has the same thing, only it's called operator precedence. And so this page on the MDC tells you what the operator precedence is. So it has this big table here of all the operators and what the precedence is. And so here is our logical and our logical or. And is preferred over or, so it will be done first. But in is up here, so in actually has higher precedence. So just by checking this table, we know that this will for sure execute before, or will evaluate before we go into this next bit. But sometimes it's just nice to like, maybe we're gonna throw parentheses around this, because you're like, I want this to be figured out for sure before that. And you know what? It's okay. It's probably better to have an extra amount of parentheses. Your minifier can take it out if it figures out that it needs to, or you know, it doesn't need them. But for you and communicating with your team, I am a big fan of using parentheses around the keyword in, around this stuff, just so you know, and everyone knows what's going to happen first. This reminds me of a really cool technique that James Podolsky used. And so what this is this is a way of detecting the version of IE that you're in. And we do it in script, but we're actually going to use conditional comments in HTML to figure it out. And this piece of code is really, really cool. Okay. The basic idea is that we're going to create, we have these conditional comments, and we're going to inject them into a div. And then inside of them, we have an I element. And we're just going to see if that I element exists after we inject it. Because if it exists, then it passed the conditional comment. And if it didn't, then it didn't. And so we can kind of like know what version they will exist for and such and such. But the crazy thing about this is that this is a while loop, right? And traditionally while loops are like while condition thing block, right? This does not have a block. It only has the condition. There is no set of parentheses right here, or sorry, curly braces. And you're like, what? That's legal? And it is legal. You can do for loops and while loops without the block. But the really cool thing here is that, so we're actually doing two things within this while loop. We are setting the inner HTML of this div to this guy. And then we're doing a second thing. And the trick is that we're using a comma. And a comma comes up very rarely in in script, aside from like variable declarations where it kind of has a different role. And essentially what it does is the comma says this has to be evaluated, and then this does. And so it essentially lets us get away with putting two statements inside of a while condition. Whereas like if this was a semicolon, like there would be a syntax error. Like you can't put a semicolon in there. But it's totally fine with a comma. And so we're actually tricking a while loop into doing two things when it would think that it only wants to do one. And so, yeah, that's about it really. And I want to show one other thing, which is a later iteration of this script. Let's see if I can bring it up. Yeah, here it is. I had this. We actually don't get elements by tag name inside the while loop anymore. And you're like, whoa, wait. I get elements tag name once, and then even though I'm changing what's inside this div, all of a sudden this all still knows what's going on. And yeah, it does. Okay, so this is the return value of get elements by tag name is a node list. And so it's not really it's not an array, it's a node list. And a node list can be either static or it can be live. And the return value for get elements by tag name is a live node list. So basically this can change all at once, depending on if it changes. Like the return value, sorry, the result of get elements by tag name will actually update along with the document updating. And it's worth pointing out that document.querySelectorAll does not change. This is basically all JavaScript libraries worked around the not live node list, because when the DOM spec was invented, they were like, oh, it'd be really cool. Wouldn't it be handy to just know when things update and like get that? And it actually kind of sucks. So JavaScript libraries worked around that by like throwing it into an array whenever you get the result, and then that is just like stuck in stone, right? So querySelectorAll, when that was spec'd out, they were like, oh, we're not going to have that be a live node list. It will be a static node list. If you get I once, it will that result of that will not change. And so this would not work with document.querySelector, for example. So that's pretty rad. All right. I wanted to talk a little bit about CSS hooks. They're new as of jQuery 1.4.3 or 1.4.4, and they're pretty righteous. Let's check out. Well, let's go into an example first. All right, here we have a dancing bear. He's going to be important later. Right now, I'm just going to use the console. jQuery CSS hooks. It's an object. Okay, we got height, opacity, and width in here. What about opacity? Opacity has a get. Height has a get and a set, and they're both functions. So, CSS hooks are basically ways to override what the normal behavior for getting and setting CSS properties would be. And with CSS hooks, you can say, if you're going to set height, you're going to do all this stuff instead of like just setting the style property, like style.height equal to whatever. We're actually going to like do some extra stuff. So I'll show you by example how opacity gets treated. So this is opacity. So what happens is we're in here because we're in, if jQuery support opacity is not true, this is basically, in IE6 doesn't have support for native CSS opacity. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to say, if you want to change opacity, if you get it, we're going to do this funky thing, and we're going to grab it off a filter. And then if you set it, we're going to, set that alpha filter that you're very used to seeing and looking up every single time you want to use it because it's such a pain. Yeah. So here we're overriding opacity with custom get and set methods. So jQuery uses this internally in a few places, but it exposes this basically this like override API for you so that you can do some cool stuff. Now, this is the one site that you need to know if you're interested in CSS hooks. It's Brandon Aaron's CSS hooks repo on GitHub. Brandon and a bunch of other hackers, Louis Remy Babe, and some other cool people, basically like wrote all the CSS hooks that you'd ever need, and they're all just sitting here waiting for you to discover how amazing they are. So let's like dig into some of this. We're gonna go back to this bear. Love this bear. Love this bear. All right. I'm gonna tweak JS Fiddle a little bit. Fiddle with JS Fiddle. Oh shit! Yes, I did. Yep. All right, good. All right, so check it. We got a bear. Breaking it down. This bear is a background image on the body, okay? And his positioning is 55 pixels to the left, to the right, and 15 pixels down from the top. Rad. And all I'm doing in the script, all I'm doing in the script right now is just console logging out what background position gives to me. So it comes down here, and we have 55 pixels, 15 pixels, just like I said, like big deal. Okay. Now, if I were to say background position Y, you right here, Y, this will work actually. In my case, it'll give me back 15 pixels. Without any sort of like special handling, this would not work in Firefox. Firefox does not expose a background position Y or X property. It only exposes the background position, which kind of sucks. Like parsing out the shorthands to things that you actually want to deal with is a pain. So with CSS hooks, we can actually say, hey, if you don't support background position Y natively, we're going to make you support it, right? So down here, I just basically have the background position CSS hook that's been written. Brandon wrote this one. And he's like, hey, if here's my feature test. Do you support it? Yeah, no. Okay, so otherwise we're gonna like define the support for you. So here's the get and set. So what this allows us to do is to manipulate on the fly. So I'm gonna do that right now. We're gonna animate the background position of the body tag. And so let's animate. I'm going to do this style of syntax. We're going to go to 200 pixels down from the top. And what comes next? Duration? Sure. Duration. I'm going to go with fancy 4 seconds. It's a real jerk move. Fancy 4 seconds. Ease out elastic. That's exponential notation if you're curious. Just means 3 zeros. Okay. Is that right? Is that good? I think it's good. Let's try it. Run. Woo! That's not bad. I'm gonna add a little bit of delay. Just. Woo! I like it. I like it a lot. I like sharp. Bear's looking sharp. All right. So CSS hooks. Let's say you wanted to take that someplace where it definitely should go. You would probably do something like this. All right. This is made by Phil Dawkins, who is also a contributor to the CSS Hooks repo. I'm going to go down to where it matters. Down here, we have an awesome element. It is the body. we grab the body, we store it in awesome. Every 500 milliseconds, we're going to call this action right here. So we're going to take the body and we're going to animate a few things on it. We're going to animate the color of the body, the background, the text color, the background color, and then the text shadow color, text shadow X and Y, and blur. So we're actually able to manipulate the color, the X and the Y and the blur all individually, and animate transitions between them, which you can't really do normally. So we have a lot of control, and as a result, basically, I don't know, we get that shadow action behind it. All right, I think that's enough. So the other thing, in addition to basically like giving you access into what should be the longhand versions of a lot of CSS properties for getting and setting, it makes dealing with CSS3 awesome. So here we have a box shadow. We're setting the box shadow, right? And we're setting it to badass, which is a light lime green, if you're curious. If I set this box shadow, it's not going to do jack. And basically, oh no, there's one. But, you know, you're used to seeing this kind of stuff, the vendor prefixes. Yeah. And so that's necessary. But with CSS hooks, we can basically override the box shadow property. So when we set it, we can make sure that our CSS hook actually sets the Moz, the WebKit, the O, the MS, and the standard one all at once, and basically make it a lot easier for us to manipulate the CSS3 things that have the vendor prefixes all over them, but have it look really nice in our code. So that's kind of what we can do. One last thing I just want to share with you is jQuery effin, right? So jQuery effin plugin. We write our effin plugin, and doing some of that, and we always return this at the bottom of it, but in the middle we're doing our stuff. It's awesome. jQuery effin. Are you curious what exactly this is? It's like this magical thing. Like we just like add on to it, and then it's a plugin, and then we can use it. What this is, I'm going to show you. Effin equals, here it is. It's the prototype. jQuery effin is the actual prototype of the jQuery object. I'm going to take this, go over, let's see, I'm just want to show you. It is the prototype. There's no buts about it. Equals, well, 3 equals this. True, right? It's a prototype. So basically, when we're adding plugins, they are going on to, oh, that's unfortunate. They are going onto the prototype. And you could write it like this, and it would work the exact same. But it's been mapped, it's been aliased to effin just for convenience, which is kind of nice. So just heads up. It's kind of cool. All right, I think that's about it for now. Just a reminder, bit.ly/JQ source always has the latest jQuery source, so put that in your bookmarks bar. Always look at that. It's good. And that's about it. Thank you very much for watching. This has been fun.